Vamos lá, então. Vamos seguir aqui. Eu não sei se a professora já está online.
Está online.
Já está online.
Está com a câmera fechada.
Posso apresentar ele?
Só um minuto.
Gente, só aviso, depois da fala da professora de Júlia, a gente vai ter um corpo pessoal, no indivíduo já organizaram. Depois é a palestra do professor Fran, que vai ser presencial, ele já está aqui. E vamos fechar com a palestra remota do Brian que amanhã nós teremos atividades presenciais e online. E as mais presenciais, a do online. Hoje, pela manhã, a gente acabou tendo tudo online, devido às chuvas, as fortes chuvas aqui na cidade de Recife, tá? Mas, só para deixar claro, esclarecimento para vocês, que amanhã a maior parte vai ser presencial, se a gente estiver aqui com a gente, tá bom? Ok, então, vamos para a próxima fala da professora Lystad, norueguesa, né? Então, a professora Lystad, ela é psicóloga, pesquisadora na área de tratamento de psicose precoce no Hospital Universidade de Oslo e professora associada da Universidade de Oslo. Os seus interesses de pesquisa incluem função cognitiva, treinamento cognitivo, terapia cognitivo-comportamental e reabilitação ocupacional em transtornos psicóticos. E a fala da professora é Artificial Intelligence Powered Virtual Reality, Treatment and Psychosis. Hi, Professor.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Okay. Are you here?
Okay, so now can you see the screen?
Not yet.
Yes. Yes.
Yes? Yes? Okay.
Okay,
Now.
great.
Now it's okay.
Okay. Okay, so thank you so much for allowing me to present the recovery project. I'm actually hosting a conference in Oslo, so I'm going to have to cut this a bit short. But it's great to be able to give a brief talk. I'm going to be speaking about the recovery project, artificial intelligence-powered virtual reality therapy in psychosis treatment. I was going to say a bit about recovery and then a bit about our project, which is a two-phased study. And I hope to share some preliminary findings and a brief summary. Our recovery project is based, of course, in the term of recovery. So as you all know, we tend to define it in terms of clinical recovery and personal recovery, which is either a duration of 12 months meeting the criteria for psychotic symptomatic remission and adequate functioning, or it's a more profound, personal and unique process involving the change of one's attitudes, values, goals, etc. And either way, I think this amounts to meeting the goals of individuals with psychosis. And in this very important study conducted by Ramsey and colleagues, they asked about the life goals of individuals with first episode psychosis. And as you can see, employment, education, social relations, those are the immediate goals our patients want to achieve. And we're going to have a look at how this is working out in practice. I don't know how this is in Brazil, but in Norway, we have tended to believe that depressive disorders and anxiety disorders are the most costly mental health disorders, Now I'm not talking about burden of illness, but in terms of societal cost, economic cost. And then this study came in 2023 by Jonas and colleagues, showing that it is actually schizophrenia, costing about 10.2 billion Norwegian kroner a year. And 30% of that is due to productivity loss, because we don't help our patients well enough in achieving, for example, employment. Treating psychosis, it's often easy to focus on psychotic symptoms, but in treating psychosis, we're actually treating a broad range of symptoms and challenges. Of course, there is psychotic symptoms, but there is also perhaps substance abuse or PTSD or unemployment. And of course, there is also anxiety. And Daniel Freeman and his colleagues conducted or assessed treatable clinical intervention targets in patients with schizophrenia, and found that 2 out of 3 individuals with psychotic disorders actually also meet the criteria for anxiety disorders, such as agoraphobia. And then there is, of course, also the question of whether our psychotherapies are optimal as they are at the moment. So based on this, recovery is an important issue in the field, both symptom reduction and functional and social activity. So the innovation is, can virtual reality help achieve recovery? And this is where the recovery study comes in. Now, originally, I was going to take you through a brief history of how we ended up here, because it's not that intuitive. We started out sort of with psychodynamic therapy, cognitive therapy, and now we're offering virtual reality therapy. But I'm going to skip these slides due to some time limitations. And just to show you this. There is a question, of course you all know this, that the literature on CBT has been quite diverse for the past years. And it's a question as to whether cognitive behavioral therapy perhaps has become a bit too theoretical, and whether we have forgotten about the B in CBT. I wanted to share this quotation by Professor Svein Friis with you, who was one of the lead authors on the TIP study, because I think it's true what he says. Clinicians often find intricate case formulations interesting, but for service users, it's often much more important to start with what's down to earth, practical and simple, without making things unnecessarily complicated. And one of our patients in one of our CBT studies actually said this: yes, I've heard lots about cognitive therapy. It has something to do with the cognitive street in the center of Oslo, which of course it doesn't. And it just goes to show there's a discrepancy perhaps in how we offer CBT and how it's received. And this is where virtual reality comes in as a potential of delivering psychotherapy in general and CBT in special. So virtual reality, just very briefly, has been called the ultimate empathy machine. So this is not actually a new field. It's been conducted quite a lot of studies in this regard. For example, as you can see, if you enter the avatar of Albert Einstein in virtual reality, you will perform better on IQ tests. If you assume a person, an avatar using a wheelchair in virtual reality, studies have found that attitudes and behaviors towards individuals with disabilities are improved, just for example. So there is quite a lot of studies, meanwhile, considering virtual reality. So what it actually does, it immerses you in digitally simulated environments that can provide both exciting and useful interactive experiences. It's been used by the gaming industries for quite some time now, but it's also becoming increasingly popular as a therapy modality. And it might just help bridge the gap between patient needs and limited clinical resources. And diving further into virtual reality, exposure is the next level. So RET, or virtual reality-based exposure therapy, is a promising approach to ensure high-quality therapy. And together, patient and therapist can address difficult anxiety-provoking situations together in real time. Often these days, we meet our patients and then we talk about things that happened perhaps a week ago. Virtual reality enables us to do that together in the present. The transfer is, of course, the mechanism behind all of this, that you learn to feel safer than you think you are. And we think that what you can overcome in virtual reality, you can basically overcome in real life. I'm just going to skip these slides as well. Very sorry, but due to the delay, I've got some time issues. But this just to show that there are some typical assumptions in individuals with psychosis, and these assumptions may actually be barriers to achieving the functional and personal goals of our patients. They often result in typical defense strategies, such as avoiding eye contact, leave situations as quickly as possible, or do activities as quickly as possible. And that might not be such a good idea, for example, if you want to have a job or want to make new friends. If you continue to scan their faces to detect hostility, that might just be a problem. So just addressing these defense strategies, that's perhaps worthwhile. And that's what we're trying to do in the recovery study. This is a collaborative effort between Oslo University Hospital, the University of Oslo, the University of Oxford, and Oslo Metropolitan University. Now, our study has two phases. We've conducted a pilot and feasibility study on existing software, and we've developed a custom-made software, which we are trying out now in an ongoing randomized control trial. The existing software, we've been so fortunate as to test, thank you to Daniel Freeman and Sinead Lamb at the University of Oxford, which is the Game Change application. This is an automated virtual reality application based on CVT principles. It has included a virtual therapist called Nick, and she is pre-programmed and will take the patient through all the scenarios in the application. And there is, of course, homework in between sessions. Just wanted to show you, this is what Game Change looks like. As you can see, technology develops extremely fast, so this already looks quite a bit old, but still it's a very, very useful and very good application. Lots of CVT techniques in it. So the setup is you start in the therapist room, you choose a scenario, then you go through the levels, and then you have a debrief between levels and at the end of the session. That's basically the build of Game Change. And the mechanism is thought to be new learning. So you enter situations that are anxiety-provoking, and you try not to use your usual defense strategies. So you thereby test and challenge your expectations. Quick example, taking the bus. If you usually only look down while being on the bus, you would try to look around, to see other people. And then if they don't look hostile, for example, that's a new experience. So maybe you can develop a new strategy for taking the bus. And the best part is that you can do it over and over and over again. So I don't know how this is in Brazil, but in Norway, no clinician is going to have the time to, for example, take the bus with a patient 30 times. And that you can do in virtual reality with the therapist. And what you can manage in virtual reality, you can probably manage in real life. So Freeman and colleagues tested game change in a large randomized control trials and found very, very good effects. They found reductions in anxiety and avoidance, barely no side effects, and this showed to be a program that clinicians and patients actually wanted to use. So we were allowed to try it out in a pilot study in Oslo, which is called VR Oslo. It's not a very creative name, so I'm just going to skip to the next slide. We wanted to test whether this was feasible and implementable in a Norwegian context. And we wanted to see if combining it with actual CBT gave better effects. We wanted, of course, to know what participants, clinicians, and leaders think about virtual reality therapy and whether it led to changes in symptoms, quality of life, and functional outcome. So what we found, we recruited 27 patients for this pilot. We had 14 virtual reality therapists, and patients had about 6 sessions of virtual reality treatment. What we found were improvements in anxiety, worry, and avoidance, significant improvements in depressive symptoms, and also improved quality of life. Patients also reported better social and occupational functioning, and psychotic symptoms remained relatively stable. 76% were satisfied or very satisfied with the therapy, and 64% found the therapy to be helpful in everyday situations. This is a very busy slide. It's basically what I just said, summed up in the table. This was very interesting to me because I have to admit, at the beginning, both as a clinician and as a researcher, I wasn't sure I would buy into all of this. But 17 of our 22 participants reported anxiety and avoidance in the real world. Can you still hear me? Can you still hear me? I'm just going to continue talking. 15 of the 22 participants reported also experiencing anxiety in virtual reality. So it does actually work. It does induce anxiety just by being in this virtual reality. Feedback from the patients was that given the choice, most patients would prefer receiving only virtual reality without the extra CBT. They defined it as helpful, a little scary. It's important that someone was there while they were doing it. Some said it has improved their lives, it feels safe. One said, I felt so ashamed from visiting my sick uncle, but now I can. I think this is also interesting. This is from a qualitative interview that was performed. We have 2 papers coming out now. They're under review, so I hope this will be able to be read in a journal just around the corner. But this is what one of the patients said. So, for example, I was at a shopping mall, and I remember people, some were sitting, some were walking, some were standing. It gave me that immersion, that feeling that I was in a mall, except I thought, okay, I'm not really at the mall, but I'm in the mall, you know? I was there basically, and I felt real emotions. Because, you know, I felt anxiety, I felt my blood pressure rise, and I got warm, and I even got tunnel vision after a while. So patients buy into this, we buy into this, and we actually believe to be somewhere we're not. These are some more quotes. I think it's also important to share the feedback from the VR therapists, from the clinicians. They say it requires quite a lot of training, and it's important to set everything up in advance. They define it as a new way of working with patients. This is also very interesting because in advance, several clinicians were quite skeptical. particularly regarding the therapeutic alliance, because all of a sudden this digital stuff enters the therapy room. They said it's important to uncover defense strategies. And this is not always obvious to the patient themselves. Time is of importance, and encouragement. It's easy to forget because there's so much technical aspects. And what they also said, VR is only a medium or a training arena. It's not a therapy in itself. And I think that's also important to remind ourselves of. I think I'm going to just skip ahead and show you this last therapy therapist feedback. I think we have developed a better relationship. The patients themselves say that. The more cognitive therapy and VR session I have had, the more the patients have been able to open up, especially about things that are difficult in their lives. With those I have followed up, I think it had simply become a better therapeutic relationship because we have done things together. It's not like they go through everything alone. These are situations we talk about, discuss, and reflect on together. So it actually just results in a better relationship in that sense. So overall, they found it to be a lot of technical stuff and not always easy to remain calm when something goes wrong. And something always goes wrong with the internet connection, the updates, low batteries and everything. And they highlighted the need for seeing everything that the patients also see in virtual reality, that they can follow it on a laptop or an iPad. So overall, therapists were actually quite positive towards using virtual reality in psychosis treatment. Just to show you that we are now in phase 2 with the recovery application. We found 2 things to be specifically important. Because when someone talks to you in virtual reality in a different language than your own, it sort of destroys the immersion. So Game Change is a very, very good application. But the fact that they were not speaking Norwegian sort of destroyed a little bit the belief in being in a virtual reality. We also experienced that individuals with psychosis in Britain and Norway, they have somewhat differing anxieties. So we've created more specifically Norwegian scenarios. We also have artificial intelligence-driven dialogue. Also because in Game Change, the virtual therapist is pre-programmed, so she will react in the same manner no matter what happens. So even if a patient would become very frightened or scared and perhaps even remove his headset, she would always react in the same way, saying, "Well done." So it didn't really match. And artificial intelligence allows us to personalize the scenarios. So we are in the process of conducting an RCT, started in November, and we're recruiting 150 individuals. So these are the recovery scenarios: taking the bus, visiting a public waiting room, going to a cafe, practice public speaking, attend a job interview, talk to your counselor at NAV. NAV is the institution in Norway that facilitates schemes and benefits, so that can be quite scary. We've also actually made 2 other scenarios. One which is working with an employment specialist, and the second is having lunch at school or on the job, basically, which can also be quite a frightening situation. This is from our kickoff. We're very excited. We have 11 sites all over Norway, so we're very excited to see what's going to happen and if this actually has an effect. And I wanted to sum up by showing this. This is one of our patients from the pilot study describing the perfect virtual reality scenario. And he says, "It would have been a Christmas party with friends, about 20 people at a bar. You'd get a lot of uncomfortable questions like, why don't you work? Or why don't you drink alcohol? Or do you have a mental illness? It would be kind of a situation where you'd also have to pay the bill. And this quote is quite funny, actually, because Christmas parties in Norway are like that. But it's also quite important because I think it takes us back to the first slide of this presentation with the goals of individuals with psychosis. So it is about having friends, it is about having a job, it is about taking part and being part of society. And I think that goes to show that that's perhaps what we need to practice in therapy. And that virtual reality actually can help us do this. So to sum up, technology at its best can connect people, as we are all learning now, but at its worst, it just makes us flail around with stupid things on our faces. And I can really tell you, this is what it feels like. You feel like flying through a universe, but it doesn't look all that good as it feels. Very many people are invested in this project. Just wanted to show you, and thank you very much for your kind attention, and sorry that this was a bit quick. Having a bit of trouble hearing you, but thank you so much, and then I'll be off, but have a good conference.
Okay, thank you very much again. Hope to see you in another opportunity.
I hope so as well. Goodbye.
Bye, have a great day. Pessoal, agora a gente vai fazer uma pausa para o coffee break e aí a gente retorna para a apresentação do professor Frank aqui.